Welcome to the Mental Health Raw and Open podcast with your host, Jody Betty.
Hi, and welcome to the Mental Health Raw and Open podcast. My name is Jody, and I'm your host. And today we are speaking with a dear friend of mine, Brice Noble. Brice, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time. How you doing, man?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I'd love to be here. I'm excited to talk to you and explore some mental health things, maybe some stoicism. Just have a good discussion. I'm ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me about I met
Yeah.
Brice because of the Stoicism spaces that they run through Via Stoica, and I tell you, man, I have never had more helpful free therapy in my entire life.
Oh wow. No, that's quite an endorsement. Thanks for that. Yeah. My name is Brice Noble. I'm a co-founder of Via Stoica, or you can find us at viastoica.com. It's basically it's a resource center, right, for Stoic philosophy, better living. Um, we have things there to good free resources for folks. We also have some coaching services that you might be interested in, or mentorship, public speaking. We do a little bit of all that. But yeah, it started my trip to Stoicism, or my journey with Stoicism really started on Twitter Spaces, or it's now X, right, since Elon took over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I started finding like-minded people. I've been into Stoicism for probably about 5 years, personally doing reading. And I said, hey, about 2 years ago, I said, there's got to be somebody out on these social media platforms. I got to start looking, maybe find some like-minded folks, and maybe have some discussions. And I mean, I love X Spaces because it's kind of like an interactive radio for those people who don't know, maybe listening. If you're on X, yeah, definitely check out Spaces, and that's a way. It's kind of a big conference call, and you can build community and all those good things. So we started to build that. I found some like-minded folks, started to build something small a couple years ago. It grew into something bigger. I met up with my partners in Via Stoica, Benny Vonkin and Brendan Hogel. They had their own kind of stuff going on. I knew Benny a little bit before that, but we basically combined forces and started to organize it and put some stuff together. We have a podcast, the Via Stoica podcast. It was formerly known as Street Stoics. We started that about a year ago, and it's done pretty well. So yeah, that's my flow with Stoicism in my personal life. I'm an IT guy for 25 plus years, mostly working in defense and aerospace. And yeah, I mean, logic and reason are my friend. If you work in the computer world, and so I naturally just kind of leaned towards Stoicism, and maybe I had most of my life. I was kind of a Stoic and didn't know it, or at least I had some of those traits. And I just, I found the philosophy several years ago, and here we are.
Yeah, and you know what? It fascinates me, I think, because people struggling with things, like so very, very long ago, and then people still struggling with the same basic, core values and things today. And I think, Stoicism is definitely picked up in popularity. When I first joined the group, I was like, oh, this is going to be all like manly man, like Stoicism and Stoic men. And then there was all these women, and I was like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, for those people who don't know, I know you talked to Benny here recently too. But for those who didn't hear that or they don't know, yeah, I mean, Stoic philosophy is a Hellenistic philosophy, so it starts in ancient Greece, about 300 BC, and it kind of becomes popularized in the early, Roman Empire. So up through about 200 BC, AD. I'm sorry, it's about that 500-year swath. Starts with a guy named Zeno of Citium, and it gets popularized with people like names you might have heard: Epictetus, Seneca, and of course Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor. It's probably the most famous Stoic. But yeah, it is in a time, to your point, it is in a time a couple thousand years ago that's very male centric, right? Um, the concepts and some of the writings, don't reflect heavily upon women's rights and things like that. It's not meant to be walled off from women at all, but it was a very war heavy culture. There's a little bit of macho in there, and that comes out, I think, in some of the teachings. But it's to me, it's really been hijacked in recent times, like the Neo-Stoic movement, how it's progressed up until where we are today, it's more progressive and liberal, and it's not meant to be, you know, inaccessible to everyone. It's not just about war and men and big muscles and things like that. You see a lot of this imagery. I think that comes out just because they really point towards discipline and strength and process. And sometimes these are things you think are traditionally masculine, and reducing your emotional state. And again, Stoics don't want you to get rid of your emotions, but they want to have you in control at all times using reason and logic. So when people think Stoic, they think of the small case S instead of the large case S. Our large case S is the philosophy being Stoic. The small case S is, if you look that up, it's more about being less like emotionless and kind of indifferent and things like that. And it's really not that, right? I think that's a bad rap and a misconception. So it isn't about that at all. But that would be what you went through would be very normal, right? You think it's going to be male dominated and very, we don't care about emotions, stuff it, the world doesn't matter, I'm not angry, I'm not sad, none of these things, I'm too tough. That's inaccurate.
Absolutely, because I find it very balanced. Like I
Yeah.
find there's a really good balance and such like I went through trauma therapy and CBT and DBT, and then I felt like I was stuck at this certain spot, and I was like, okay, well, that's the end of my healing. I can't get any further because I don't know what else to do. And then when I saw, I started joining these spaces and learned about, your inner circle and outer circle of control, and the pause and stuff. I was like, this stuff is so actually practical to put into day to day use. And for me, like, honestly, my trauma brain ran my life for decades. And it's like in the past year since Stoic Spaces that I have been able to shut that thing up and put it in the trunk of my car and lock the trunk.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's very, yeah, it's very the philosophy is very practical and pragmatic, and is based on four cardinal virtues. Courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom. And it takes courage to kind of face your fears, and like you talk about, you're expert really about trauma and how that affects people short term and long term. And so it takes courage to kind of face yourself with a radical acceptance, right, of what is, even if it's painful. And that the Stoics are good at that, saying, hey, life isn't easy. They say it right up front. And they say you're going to have challenges, but it's like, hey, you can use those to your favor, and we're not going to be afraid of them. We're just going to deal with it head on. What is. And that goes down really hard at first, but if you kind of really focus on that and buy into it, it starts to hurt less and less. So when things happen in your life, you start using different verbiage. Like, I don't say, oh, this is bad. I just say, this is a bad thing. I say, this is a thing that happened. Or I change, I'll
Right.
say challenge, right? Instead of oh, I can't get over this. So here we go again. It's that negative verbiage, right? I change that first. And the challenge after that is getting rid of kind of the negative thinking and looking at each thing that happens to us as an opportunity, right? You could even look at where Marcus Aurelius says the obstacle is the way. It's very, I mean, I love the maxims. You need to dig deeper into the philosophy other than just to focus on those quotes we see everywhere. They're nice to have and good to put in your pocket. But if you really just focus on that the obstacles in your life, your challenges, that's your way to freedom, is through it, right? Not avoiding it, not burying your head in the sand, any of that stuff. It's a radical acceptance of, okay, I have a challenge here. Now, what are my tools to deal with it? And then just working on it methodically to get beyond it. And like Marcus says, you're going to get beyond it, or it's such an obstacle that it will overtake you and will be gone anyways, right? People fight the good fight against disease and things like that. And sometimes they don't win that battle, but there's value in the fight, and fighting the good fight does mean something. And most times you do overcome things. People defeat themselves mentally. They don't even give themselves a chance because they're avoiding fear. They're avoiding this, that, and the other. So Stoics don't want you to avoid that. They just want to take a deep breath and say, what are my logical tools that I have? Okay, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to get around this obstacle? Am I going to dig underneath it? Am I going to power through it? Am I going to jump over it? But you're going to get beyond it. And it's that confidence that you really lean into, and it gives you strength. And once you can start getting beyond obstacles and not avoiding them, you're incredibly powerful. I think everybody listening has had that happen inside when you dealt with something you'd been avoiding, or it was really difficult for you to get a handle on at some point in time. You do it and you feel like you're Superman, Superwoman, right? I
Yeah.
want you to bottle that up and say, hey, you created that feeling of power. Why? By taking action. And Stoics are about what is, what have logic and reason to help me, what are the parameters, and let's get to work and feel good about our process. And then you can glean that kind of that pleasure, that good feeling as you go along. Joy and happiness are about making progress towards a goal. It's not about reaching the goal, because you have many goals in life, many purposes. You don't have one purpose, you have many changes, right? The life throws things at us. We're going to deal with it. So we have confidence in that. I have confidence in my process, and I have confidence that I'm going to get over whatever's in front of me, or, my time will come, to put my energy to change, to pass on, to move on, or whatever. So be it. That's another thing Stoics always talk about is memento mori. Remember that you will die. It's not a morbid fear of death, but an acceptance of what is, again, and death is a change, and it's part of life, but it's a beautiful thing. It's part of that circle of life, and we're all part of it. So let's just be empowered and go get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a couple of things that really helped me, like I was very emotively responsive. I didn't really think of things very logically. I just like if something triggered me, then I would just like react with an emotional, reaction, and it was never really good. And this taking pause thing has been like beyond helpful. And also learning that when something good happens, it's also okay to take the pause and, appreciate that something good happened and kind of like sit with that as well. It doesn't have to be just, used on the negative things in life.
Yeah, I mean, I know I touched on those four cardinal virtues, right? Courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom. Those are core to Stoic philosophy. And then what you were kind of touching on is their key practice. Outside of those core virtues, you're going to think about the dichotomy of control. It's something Epictetus talked about a lot, and others have since. And it's what can I really control in my life, and what can I not control? And when you really think about it, you can control very little, right? But I mean, that lane of control is something that's still very powerful. Like I always say, how I see the world, how I absorb it, and what value I ascribe to the things that are happening to me, and then how I respond to it are all under my control, 100%. The job that you have, the relationship that you have, the place that you're living, your physical condition, the weather. Like, think about all these things that you just don't really have a grip on. You think you do to some degree. You might have some influence, perhaps, but that's not the same as complete control. And you get scared. I mean, I've always thought that most people are kind of control freaks, or maybe not control freaks, but obviously we feel more content if we think we know what's coming, and further that we can manage it and keep away those negative feelings. So I
Mm-hmm.
think the Stoics say that's baloney, right? Don't fool yourself in saying that, things are going to happen. And they have this concept of a preferred indifferent or a non-preferred indifferent. So I'm going to be indifferent, to try to be indifferent, neutral, right? I'm not being overly happy or sad in a general sense. I'm just going to try to treat what happens to me as a neutral thing, and then respond accordingly. But I prefer to win the lottery. If I bought a lottery ticket, I prefer to be healthy as opposed to ill. I'd prefer to have maybe a lot of friends or a lot of options for this, that, and the other than not. But you can't control that 100%. That's going to be outside of your ability to do anything about. And so you have to be comfortable with that. And so when good things do come your way, the preferred things, you can really enjoy them for what they are and say, hey, that's nice, really enjoy that, and I'm going to remember this experience. And if it's something that you don't prefer, that you don't enjoy as much, you just got to say, hey, what am I going to do to deal with it? And then that moment's over, and then the next moment comes, and maybe you have something that's preferred that comes your way. So it's not being saying, hey, please, sir, slap me in the face, please, sir, may I have another, right? But it's about saying that's not going to keep me down, and then I'm going to get something good the next time, or preferred. But I'm going to try to be neutral about it. It's not good things or bad things per se. It's that things happen, and that I have the ability to absorb it the way I want and respond to it the way I want, and that gives me strength, and it gives me confidence and some calm.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've used the actual like image, I've drawn it out myself, and I've, referred it to many, many people now, to sit down and draw out a circle And in the inner circle, you put the things that are in your control. And then in the outer circle, when you start to think about it, you're right. Like there's just so much that is out of your
Yeah.
control. So if it's out of your control, spending time worrying about it is just like a waste of time almost.
It is, but I mean, human nature tells me like just because I know, there's so many times things like this is unreasonable to worry about this, or I can't control, but you still feel it, and that's okay. And I
Yes.
want people to understand that it takes time for and I think a lot of people probably know it takes time for your heart and your feelings to match what you're seeing or feeling or seeing on the whiteboard, right? What you know and how you feel don't don't match right away. Eventually, they kind of catch up, right? So that's why
Yes.
when
Yeah.
you feel you're a very emotional person, like you were talking about before, the best thing that you can do is pause, and before you make a decision, don't make a snap decision in the moment. Don't be overwhelmed by your feelings. Don't make decisions out of your feelings. Most times, I think. Not always is that a bad thing, but a lot of times you look back and boy, you go like, oh boy, maybe I shouldn't have
Yeah.
done
There's
that.
so many times. Yes.
Yeah. So you can some people need just a few seconds. People need a few minutes. You might need to walk away, make an excuse if you're in a bad situation. Say, hey, I got to come back to you on this, or excuse yourself and go take a little walk. I take a ton of walks. I'll tell you, it helps me sort things out. It's good in many different ways. I strongly would advocate for people when they're struggling with something, go for long walks. It activates a different part of your brain, get some exercise going. You can really think clearly sometimes, and it calms you down too. So, getting that separation, that space that you talk about, allows you to deal with your emotional state. Your emotions are your friends, as part of who you are. Don't reject that. But always, like Jonathan Haidt says, as an author of The Righteous Mind, he writes some other books. I enjoy him. Not a Stoic, but he talks about this concept of the rider and the elephant, and the elephant is our emotional state, very strong, very powerful, hard to control. But I'm the rider, and on the top, and I'm holding on. I'm pulling on those reins really tight, so I can still steer that. But it takes some strength, it takes some discipline and some effort. It might fatigue me, but your reason and your logic are your friends. But they work together, right? Your emotions are don't feel bad that you feel this way, or why do I feel this way, or even your study of Stoicism. It's like I know what I'm supposed to do, but I don't feel it. I must be a failure. I'm doing it wrong. I'm going to quit. Let me just go back to my old habits and things like that. No, that's the temptation. Don't take that. It takes time. This is Stoic philosophy is it makes a lot of sense. It's, like I said, practical, pragmatic, makes sense when you look at it on paper. It seems very reasonable, but then the proof comes in the pudding of actually putting it into work, and then being patient with yourself and feeling that change over time. I mean, I know I deal with things much differently. Certain things that used to trigger me in the past, I know that's a clinical term, and I'm careful using that, or it would push me to maybe lean into my emotions and get that temporary gratification of snapping back, pushing back, whatever. I can avoid a lot of those things that might have made me angry before, or at least minimize them.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I've been able to do. And, going to therapy and learning all these different things, but so much of it was just, like theoretical or write this down. And it wasn't for me. I mean, it was all clinical information that absorbed in my head. That's great. So I have like a great, coping toolbox, so to speak. But to put it into practicality was another thing because, like one of the things in like DBT is, like if you're going through a situation, then you want to write down the situation, then you write down the facts and feelings because they never usually match up. And in the middle of like a crisis, I don't really want to sit down with a piece of paper and like write shit down. Honestly, it just didn't work for me. So having, gone to these spaces and learned some of these things that have become so practical for me that I can, practice the pause every day. Even if I'm not perfect at it, I just keep working on it every day. If I'm faced with something, I'm like, okay, wait a second. Sit with your emotions for a second, and now let's see what your logical brain thinks about things.
I love that. Yeah. And Jody, what you've been around for maybe a year, maybe not quite that long, but you've been active in our community, and I can just tell the listeners out there, yeah, in the Stoic community, she's really stepped up, and we've seen, good positive change and great contributions. Jody is very important to the Stoic community that we have online, but talking with you personally too, it's nice to see that growth, And just for people to understand out there, look, it took years for you to get where you are, right? So it's going to take some time to unwind that. And just like everything else in life, that's kind of this longer curve towards success, right? You need to do, it's like in practice, practice, practice every day. If you're working out, you got to continually go to the gym. You got to do the right exercises. You got to put forth the effort. And then over time, you see those change. We're so addicted in our culture, especially here in the West, of kind of this fast food, microwave, instant change, make this happen, give me a pill, give me a procedure, let's do this in 3 weeks and, in a month or something like that. It's like, don't put a timetable on yourself. Just try to get better one step at a time and feel good about that. Like Marcus Aurelius talks about reflecting back on Plato. Plato comes from that Greek tradition, the hundreds of years before Marcus was born, but he looks back on Plato's writings, and his most famous book is probably The Republic. That's kind of this perfect idea of a society. And Marcus says, hey, you don't have to wait for things to be in perfect form for you to take action, or if it's not coming together the way you want, it shouldn't stop you from moving in that positive direction. So, you can get hung up on trying to be too good too soon, or you make up your own timeline of I should be better by this time and that time, and it really becomes self-defeating. So you got to put that aside and just say, getting good at anything, it's a long practice. It's, like learning. You never stop learning. Just because you're out of school, that doesn't mean anything. You should always be looking to learn and get stronger mentally, and thank God that we can. Physically, you can only go so far, but mentally, you can keep building that brain power every day. This is really limitless.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, what's been, eye-opening is people ask me a lot, like, when will I be healed? Like if I do this and I do that, then, when are you healed, so to speak? And I think Stoicism has kind of allowed me to step back at the situation, out of the situation, and look at it and say, okay, wait a second, you might never be quote healed, because what is healed? And second of all, you will grow. And that's what's important, is taking these baby steps, not setting this end goal, taking these baby steps and then enjoying the journey. Because, life is short for some people, and to have an end goal is always good, but if you are just focusing on that end goal, then you're missing out on everything, every baby step you took on the way to get there.
Yeah, and like you said, the something we've talked about a number of times, and you've been there, Jody. We talk about the difference between pleasure and kind of that instant gratification that feels so good, that high, and then the concept of joy or happiness. So when you say, "Hey, what is happiness?" People a lot of times, especially in the West, the United States, Europe, you kind of got this capitalist mentality, and I'm a capitalist. I'm good with that, but it kind of gets overboard, and then it's about I'm happy if I have stuff, and I have what's
Hmm.
my money situation, and what do I really have, and stuff could be your relationships. It's like, oh my God, I don't have any kids, or I'm not married, I don't have any kids, I'm a failure, blah blah blah. You kind of look around you based on the societal standards, and then you judge yourself that way, and that's really dangerous. And I mean, I know I lived my life that way for a while, probably until like the last 10 years it started to change for me, and I had to go through some loss myself. And I was riding high in my late 20s and my 30s, and I had pretty much everything that you wanted. A great job, I had a 10-year relationship, I had investments, I had bought my first home, things like that. So everything's looking good, and I went through some instability, and I lost parts of those things, some key parts, and it was very hurtful. I've rebounded and I've rebuilt, and things are much better for me again. But sometimes I don't hope or wish anybody have to go through pain. Or you talk a lot about trauma, a lot of difficulties, but we can learn from those things. And I feel a lot of times folks go through a difficult time and then they just want to shed themselves from it. They don't want to think about it. They go, oh, that was icky. That was painful. Let me run away. I'm going to break off the rearview mirror, not reflect back, all these
Yeah.
things. I think that's the temptation, and that's totally normal. But I think the Stoics ask you to, hey, let's take inventory of what happened. Something like that happened again. How might I do something different? That's this concept of negative visualization. They take firm assessment of what is, and they just say, hey, if this comes around again, how am I going to act better? What decisions could I have made that where I could have avoided that? Because you know how life things come back around, and people who have slipped into kind of bad habits and bad behaviors, they get kind of locked in and they feel hopeless. And it's like you just have to break out and do one good decision at a time, and you can pretty much change anything. And that's I know that seems like a throwaway, but it's absolutely true. But it's a slow process, and having confidence and faith in yourself, and then faith in that process. That's what the Stoics give you. They give you a framework where you don't have to rely on what society says is being successful. I don't have to say, oh, I have to have this job, I have to have this income, blah blah blah. I can say they say virtue is the only good. That's what the Stoics say. So it's doing the best you can with what you have in the moment. That might be a lot, it may be a little, and then that flexes. People sometimes rise to high highs and they crash, and then they rise to high highs again. Sometimes they crash again and rise up again, right? That's the way life is. And learning to enjoy it, like you said, step by step, and saying, hey, even my challenges are a gift. Being able, you woke up today, you have your intellect, you have your understanding of the world, you have your philosophy, you can do good things for yourself and then turn that into good things for others. That's what the Stoics want you to do. It's not about being selfish and focusing on yourself, me. It's about having a good self-awareness, being as strong as you can, going to the gym and building yourself up. And then I take that strength and then I go use it in the community. So the strong version of Brice is better for the world. Strong version of Jody is best for the world because you have more to give. You live up to your promise. And your promise is just to be the most virtuous person that you can, have morals and ethics, and live your life that way. Focus on that process. And then the outcomes become secondary. Of course, that I prefer, here we go with the indifference again, I prefer to win every time I play a game, right? That feels good. That's the pleasure. But the real joy comes from that. I'm prepared and I'm a good game player, whatever it is, athlete, and I went out there and gave it my best. And even if I lose, I can feel good about my process. The Stoics want you to say, buy into the process, and the process is about virtue ethics, and then you're winning every time. You're slightly indifferent to that outcome, and then we'll deal with the outcome the way it is and enjoy the pleasure. That's a byproduct of my happiness. It's not happiness itself.
I think I brought Stoicism onto the soccer field without even knowing it.
Oh yeah,
Because that's how I played, right? Like I'm very short, first of all, for a goalie. And I just, went out, and if we won, we won. If we lost, we lost. But I just went out and prepared my best and did my best every time. And I just happened to be gifted at soccer. And so, like, we won a lot, which was, the joy of it all. But being ready and being prepared and having that, inner confidence on the soccer field was huge for me in my life, because it was like, the trauma I've been through, it was kind of like the only constant that I had growing up was soccer. So I started when I was 4 and I stopped when I was, 42. Um, and unfortunately, I couldn't spread that confidence, into other areas of my life until more recently. But having it during, the worst times of my life and having that to rely on was like literally life saving at points in time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you're talking about. I think sports are always a good analogy, right? And I was not a soccer player. I was a tennis player in high school and as a junior before that. And I did pretty decent here in Southern California. Our teams were competitive. We went to the Southern Section playoffs, CIF out here, and I did okay. But I'll tell you what, the greatest match I remember is one that I played doubles mostly. I played some singles, but mostly doubles. But me and my doubles partner were matched up against like a nationally ranked type of opponent or opponents, and that were playing high school at the time. They went on to do bigger and better things. And I'll tell you what, we lost, but that was probably the greatest match we ever played. I mean, I felt better in that performance. I gave everything I had. I performed to the best of my ability, and we showed well against really good competition. And I feel best about that. And as opposed to maybe winning against easy opponents or not preparing or getting lucky, things like that. So there's so much strength and joy and happiness in that preparation and performing and not letting yourself down doing the hard work, taking those steps. I think that's a winner every time. That's what the Stoics want us to do: is buy into that virtue, use courage, justice, and temperance, and wisdom to guide all your actions, and then go to work. That's something you can control. People sometimes get passive, usually because they get frustrated and they feel this is hopeless or whatever. And it's like that's the negative cheese not to take the bite of, right? If you can avoid that and just
Mm-hmm.
go to work, you can probably feel it yourself too, Jody. In soccer, you might have lost some matches, but you performed well against outstanding opponents, and you can feel really good about that. And that's not about winning, right? It's not about winning at all there. It's about your preparation, and you've won if you've done the best that you can. And most times, I believe, if you prepare well and you're dedicated and using virtue, right, as your guide, you're still going to win a lot.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it was funny because when I started playing, there was no age group that young. So I was 4.5, I think, and they stuck me in with a team of 8 and 9-year-old girls. So it's funny because I just saw the picture. I found the picture recently. I was like, holy shit, am I ever small compared to everyone else? I'm just like this tiny little thing, but I happen to be fast and, pretty skilled at a young age. So it worked out for me. And it also, I never played in my own age division. I always played up. So by the time I was 13, I was playing in the, women's senior over 18 division, which was great for many reasons because, who doesn't want to party with 18-year-olds when you're 13? But just always, always playing up against
Yeah,
higher competition just built me up. It just, it made me better.
absolutely. And I love how you're challenging yourself, and you're maximizing your talent, made you better. But again, I can't emphasize more is we got to kind of retrain our brain. And you were talking about CBT before. Well, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a very common practice and has been in psychotherapy for the last 60 plus years, was created by somebody who borrowed these concepts from Stoic philosophy. So I can't remember the doctor's name. I should have written it down, but it's like the late 50s, early 60s when CBT starts to come into effect as a service of psychotherapy and becomes really popularized. And it's this concept of rewiring your brain, retraining yourself. What values am I putting to these thoughts? And that's exactly what it is the thoughts are not you. Thoughts are thoughts. It's the value that you ascribe to them. And then from the value you ascribe to them, there's certain emotional states that are going to rise up in you depending on who you are. And then those emotions will prompt you to take certain actions or create ideas in your head to deal with those emotions, right? And those could be very unhealthy. So you got to get ahead of it, right? We talk about that pause and saying, whoa, I feel something bubbling up in me, this kind of pre-emotion that the Stoics talk about. It's an ascent to emotion. It's that little wedge of time where you haven't let the emotional state taking over you, because once you do, whatever that emotional state is inside of you, then it's here comes the ideas and the actions that are going to follow it. And in the moment, you're going to be very tempted to quickly pull the trigger on something, right? That's the temptation. So it's getting out in front of it and then changing the value that I'm giving to these thoughts or these experiences or things that are happening, right? They're not happening to you, they're just happening, right? You ascribe the value to any of those things. You can take away that power whenever you want. Now, is it easy? Can you snap your fingers and do it? No. And people are listening to me saying that's not that easy. It's not easy. But I'm telling you, if you continue to do the right thing and practice this virtue and be patient with yourself, pause, get out of there, don't let your emotional state take complete control, you can eventually rewire things to where there's thoughts and ideas you might have had years ago that would cause you to go right into the dumper, and now it just doesn't do that because you basically created a new circuit.
Yes, exactly. And it's so important, especially for, like trauma survivors, like for myself, having had so many expectations placed on me by a very narcissistic and abusive, toxic father. It was up until this year that, I kind of realized, well, wait a second, these expectations that I'm trying to live up to, they're not even mine. Like they're literally not my expectations. So why am I trying to live up to them? I need to put them aside and then realize what I expect of myself and what I want to do. And again, not an easy thing to do and not something that comes really quickly, but it's definitely doable.
Yeah, it's not easy to do, but the first step is knowing what do I do? Or if I could
Yes.
control this and say snap my fingers and make all the bad emotions go, what are the steps I'm going to take? Well, first you got to set up what are the steps. And that, and the Stoics give you a nice framework, for life if you don't have one. And a lot of people I've met in life, and maybe even me at a certain point, didn't really have a good feeling for it's like, what do I really value? What's important to me? What am I really willing to go to bat for? What am I willing to accept and what am I willing to not accept? Say, my boundaries just move around. And that we get stuck in that trap because we want to please people. And I'm kind of I read a good book that, my fellow compatriot Benny pointed me to toward No More Mr. Nice Guy. He thinks he suffers from nice guy syndrome, and Benny is very nice. I mean, Jody will say that I'm more of a not. I mean, I'm a nice guy too, but people can get pretty annoyed with me, so I'm not quite at that level. But I still have those same people pleasing tendencies, and I was raised by certain people that were very kind and nice and kind of looked the other way and didn't establish good boundaries, right? But you have to protect yourself, and it's like you can be a good person, but you don't. Me being nice, I don't have to win anybody over by giving too much up of yourself, by not knowing what you really value, what your boundaries are, where you're willing to say, hey, I'm not going to accept this. I don't believe in this. A lot of people don't really have firm beliefs, right? They just kind of live their life in the wind and whatever the trend is, and then whatever they feel in the moment. Now think about that. Doesn't that feel so out of control? We're control freaks, and
Oh,
it's like, yeah, my emotional state. You know how it is. You could feel one way one day the next, and then shift back 2 days later. And you see people live their lives that way, and it's just so sad. You can't. How do you get anything done? You're never agreeing on, hey, I'm going to stand for this, or I'm not going to stand for this, or I value this, or I don't value that. You just look to others to say, I guess I should value this day, and then it's just it can cause your life to be a wreck.
absolutely. I've had friends like that, and I call them Jello because they seem to mold to whatever or whomever they're
Yeah,
around at the time.
yeah, yeah. I mean, peer pressure was something. I'm an '80s kid, right? And so doxing myself with my age, getting up there a little bit. But yeah, so yeah, you get peer pressure, or you want to fit in, or you want so much to be liked or accepted, and you're like, again, you're an expert on trauma and going back to a very young age, and it's I can't speak to it, but you could. But I've heard you speak, and I've always been quiet and listened to your experiences. And these things become ingrained; they become part of you, and you don't write. You don't even know why you feel the way you do. It doesn't make any logical sense that you do that. Maybe you pay attention to things you shouldn't, or you don't pay attention to things that you should. You value things you don't know why, and it could have been passed down from a parent or some other influence or some other trauma event that you have. Your brain is very tricky. It tries to protect you in certain ways. It'll block things out. It'll change the story, right? Your narrative will change so you don't feel a certain way. Your brain's always trying to put you in a place where there's less discomfort, which is fair. But the Stoics will tell you, hey, being uncomfortable is okay, and we're all going to feel uncomfortable. It's like, well, what do we do about it? We're not going to hide from it. We're not going to run from it. We're not going to pretend it didn't happen. We're just going to kind of go to work on it and just kind of unwrap it, one brick at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I call, like healing traumas like peeling an onion, right? You just got to take the skin off, and then there's layer and layer and layer and layer. And eventually, once you work on all those layers, you will get to the core. There's no time limit, and there shouldn't be a time limit. Healing's at your own pace, but there's no way around it. If you want to heal, you have to go, through the shit. You can't walk beside it or, jump over it. You really just have to wade through it one way or another and come out the other side, and then, go back and reflect. And I think reflection's a huge thing in stoicism too, because we don't really, we get through something and then we're like, okay, phew, it's over, it's done, and that's great. But we don't sit back and say, okay, now what can I learn from this? So for me, from coming from my trauma, for it to make some sense that so much trauma happened, I was like, okay, there has to be a gift in this. And for me, the gift was the gift of empathy, and the gift of being able to now, relate to people who have been in, a suicidal frame of mind, and having that ability to rationalize and reason them off the edge into a safe space. And that, has been the purpose of my trauma.
Yeah, and that's so beautiful, right? It's we don't have that 30,000 foot view. I mean, people sometimes we talk about religion. People find this framework in religious beliefs too, and that's totally fine. I think philosophy and religion kind of go hand in hand. You don't need to be a religious person. You don't believe in God, or you believe in a higher power, or you don't believe kind of the way that it's told at the churches. That's fine. But I think we can all agree that there's something bigger outside of us, right? That we don't control. And I still believe in kind of like the Stoics do. They're kind of this logos, this natural universe, but it's still a power. It's a creative source. There, you've been given reason and logic, these tools to help you deal with. You could say it's a gift from God. Like the logos could be similar to God, right? The way that the Stoics talk about, especially Seneca, he talks about kind of the logos in a God way. He references as God, capital G, and being able to see your heart and all these things that are very close to some Christian beliefs. And the Stoics and the early Christians they're really rubbing elbows. It's around that same time frame of the time of Christ, and the Gospels, the New Testament was being written and stuff. So there is the Stoics show up in the New Testament. So there is some rub between Christianity and that Western philosophy that goes through Greece and Rome, and then it comes out the other side, right? The kind of the Greek and Roman ways get squashed in favor of the church. But there's these virtue ethics; they still apply. They show up in different religions. They show up in different ways of living for people who are just maybe like the old New Age people, things like that. You can take some of these values and take them as your own. You don't have to ascribe yourself to any church or whatever, but it's just better living. And that's what we're searching for as a Stoic. But without that framework of value, what is virtue? What is ethical? What do I really believe? You can get lost. And so that's what we do at Via Stoica, is we offer coaching services and mentorship in case maybe you're struggling with that. And coaching is really about setting goals and giving you some kind of practical ideas of how to maybe see things through a Stoic lens. It's not therapy, right? We're not there to unwind people's serious issues, and sometimes we need that, right? But a lot of times people don't. They just need some guidance. They need a reset. They need just some practical ideas, somebody to hold them accountable. So we're accountable and trying to keep people on track. And for a lot of folks, hey, that's really all you need to get going. And so, yeah, that's the value add right there.
Absolutely, because I've used both you and Benny for coaching and had fantastic experiences and learned so much, um, knowledge and practical ways to do things. And I was so grateful to be able to get that experience from you both.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we love talking to you, and we work with other folks too, and we get good feedback. And it's not a replacement for therapy or anything. You can work hand in hand. I mean, I have a person I've been talking to for almost 6 months now, and she has regular appointments with her psychologist. And, I talk to her once a week, and she takes the notes, or sometimes I give her notes, and she takes it into her therapy session and say, hey, this is what I talked to with my Stoic coach, and these concepts and these ideas. And, we've got good response from her counselor too. So
Oh, awesome.
yeah, so you can use them together. It's not an either or. We like to think of it as a step up towards therapy or a step down from, but we always need support, right? Think of it as peer support on steroids in a sense. But yeah, people keeping you accountable, helping you develop your framework or keep you on track if you didn't have it, and you can get some pretty amazing results. You are so we're all very powerful. That's this. I think Stoicism's had a revival here in especially the last 20 years, because we've lost so much faith in our institutions. Right, governments let us down, the churches let us down. You look at big academia and the big doctors, and what we went through with COVID. Nobody has confidence in anybody anymore, right? Because we know that people are flawed, and the system is made up of people, and that we can't control that. So the Stoics give that power back to you, right? That type of thinking, that type of philosophy is saying, hey, the power is within you, and the only power you have is to control what you can. So develop your own set of ideals and principles, based in virtue ethics. The Stoics give you some ideas, and then from there you can kind of just proceed through life and feel good about that process again. And whatever government you live in, how much ever money that you have, like I said, whether you live in a mud hut out in subcontinental Africa, or you live in a penthouse in Manhattan, it doesn't matter in a Stoic's view. I mean, Marcus Aurelius was one of the most powerful people to ever live, and the person he referenced as the most was Epictetus, who was born a slave. So in Marcus's mind, the superior Stoic was the guy that was the slave, which I always think is kind of a cool story there. But that shows you that when you reframed your life to say, hey, this is important to me, and what is important to me? Just being virtuous, just being ethical, doing the best I can with what I have. Then it isn't about your stuff. Whether you have little or a lot, it's just about being efficient and being consistent. And that's what this is about. Like I said, going to the gym or diet, these are they were practicing for whatever your craft is, just doing that, consistently and really putting your best effort into it and feeling good about that. Then you feel good about yourself. You're going to rise up to the best place that you can. And then you're going to turn that over to help the community. That's what the Stoics tell you to do. Do the best version of yourself to help as many people as you can. And that's your legacy, right? People remember the way that you lived your life. The most impactful people I've ever met were just impressive. I may not have agreed with all the things that they believed in, but their consistency was impressive. And that as long as they want to try to help the good, the community and be positive influence, and they're consistent with that, and they're very joyful. You see people like that. It's like, what is their magic? How did they get there? That's it. That's it, right? It's just effort and consistency and believing in this framework, but you have to have one to start with, right? You can't just be at the whim of the world.
Absolutely. And I think I lived for a long time at the whim of the world. And in this last year, I can see the growth, and I can feel the growth and the confidence, like without, being part of the Stoic community. There's a question as to whether I would have even started this podcast up, because, a year ago, I didn't have the confidence to do it. I was like, oh my God, I can't do this again, and no one's going to listen. Who wants to listen to me? Can't even stand to listen to myself, the whole rigmarole. And then after, being part of a powerful community and learning so much, it's just like, well, wait a second. What's the worst that's going to happen? Like, is it going to destroy my life? No, I've overcome,
Mm-hmm.
multiple traumas. So now I try and do that. I try and look at a situation and say, okay, if I'm afraid of it, what's the worst thing that can happen? And if the worst thing can happen isn't going to destroy my life, then step out of your comfort zone and go for it.
Yep, and that's another Stoic practice. Good, Jody, there with negative visualization, kind of saying, yeah, well, what am I really going to lose here? What is holding me back? It's being honest and taking that, that deep introspective view. And what I was trying to talk about before, and I just remembered I kind of got sidetracked, was we don't have the ability, remember, to have that long-term view, that 30,000-foot view. And like I was talking about religion and God, like people say, well, I trust in God. Well, you're trusting in fate, right? And it's amazing how in our lives we go through short-term difficulties, and it's like, oh, this is terrible. This is the end of the world. This relationship's ending, or this job is ending. What am I going to do? My life is over. And then when you look at it a longer period of time, it's like, wow, that was actually good for me. Or, wow, I got a better job. Or thank God I got out of that relationship, because look, that person connected with somebody else, and look what's happened. It's like, where I really dodged a bullet. So we don't have the ability to see the long-term picture. So all these things that we go through, that means say, this is tragic, this is tragic. I could say, yeah, that's difficult, and I would like your life to be as nice and free of difficulty as possible. What if I said, Jody, everything you went through in your life, at the end when you're talking to God or whatever, your higher power, however it works, it's like, hey, you were at maybe a certain point of your life, all those experiences helped you help hundreds, maybe thousands of people. So through your suffering, you turned it into something good. And that was your purpose the entire time, was to endure and then turn this around, saying, hey, I am tough, and I'm going to use this to help others. Why? Because you can. And that's what the Stoics say is, hey, you have a duty to live up to your personal nature, not the nature of like the trees and the birds and that type of thing, although they have a very good relationship with that, almost like a Zen Buddhist type of thing, that they feel we're all part of this like giant organism of life. But my personal nature is something separate. That's an ethical domain. That's saying you've been given the gifts, as we all has as humans, of reason and logic, that we can do things just for the purpose of doing them, just to be good, just to be virtuous. And the animals and the plants, everything else can't do that. Not, at least not consistently. Maybe an elephant can, or a chimp or something. Like in certain situations, you see some empathy, maybe there's some science behind that, but they can't consistently do it. You can. And you can take anything that happens into your life, rework it in your head to say, I don't know the big picture. I'm not 30,000 feet up. I can't see that. I can see the car accident that just happened in front of me, but I can't see the 10 or 12 blocks ahead of time. I have easy free riding. I just need to get my car working again and get going. And I'm going to have, things are going to be easy and better for me. You don't have the advantage. You have to have faith, right? We have faith, capital F, in our religious beliefs. But you can also have faith in yourself and in your process, and refining that, and knowing that I'm going to give my best effort. I'm going to try to do the best I can for myself and others. It's going to give good results. It's going to make me feel, it's going to empower me to keep going. And I believe at the very end that I'm going to get those good results anyway, without taking any shortcuts or buying into the world's view of, yeah, you're good or you're bad or whatever. I got to put that aside and say, I live my life according to these values, and I'm good with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, when it comes right down to it, as you said, with legacy, people remember you for how you treated them. And you can have such a huge effect by doing something so small. Like even just checking in on someone, maybe no one has checked in on them in days. And what does it take for me to, send out 5 little messages to say, are you guys doing okay? And not only does it help me, but in the long run, it usually helps them as well. I get like, oh, thank you, thank no one has checked in on me kind of thing. And it's a gift to be able to give that.
Yeah, no, these are all gifts. Look at it. Each day you wake up, look at it as a gift. I mean, Marcus Aurelius talks about that in Meditations. You develop this sense of gratitude to start your day. I can't emphasize that enough to anybody listening, that that's a game changer. When you can realize that each day truly is a gift, that your existence is so low percentage, that we're here having this conversation, that we exist, that I've evolved or you've evolved, that we live in a world that has developed this way, and that we exist. It is so, even if you don't believe in God or providence or anything, that's fine. Even from a scientific perspective, it's one in billions, many billions or trillions, that any of this came together the way it did. So I like
Hmm.
to think, right? So that you can wake up today, that you woke up today, that we're having this conversation now is all a gift. What are you going to do with it? Even if it's a challenge, it's like, hey, when you get to the Stoic sage, which is kind of the wise man, the wise person, the person who's constantly doing it the right way. And I don't know if there's ever been a perfect sage, or it's almost like a Christ-like figure, but it's like when you get to a point where it's like, wow, something happened that would normally level you, and you go, just kind of roll up your sleeves and like, well, I guess I'm going to be busy doing this for a couple of weeks, and kind of smile.
Yes.
It's like when you can really deal with whatever life throws in, it's like, come on, give me another. Like I can take, like, is that all you got? Like when you can have that type of attitude, like I said, you're invincible. And then anything that happens in your life, not good things or bad things, things happen. Anything that happens to you, you can say, hey, it's all a gift. It's all a gift. My frustration, what I went through, my bad relationship, my loss of this, my loss of that. Hey, I had the opportunity. How am I going to do it better next time? Or, what does life have for me now? Or maybe that was never my purpose. Maybe my purpose is to do this. I'm going to adjust. I'm going to be that kayaker on the river of life. I can't control the flow of the river. I can't control the tides, but I can steer. I can try to avoid a rock here and there. I can try to identify where I want to maybe try to get off and land my kayak and maybe get back on the land. But if that doesn't work, I'm just going to keep pedaling and looking downstream again, right? Peeking around the corner and using that negative visualization to avoid the things that might cause me the most trouble, because I know myself more than anybody does, right? You know yourself more than anybody will ever know. And so you know what you need to do to get yourself in the right position, and just be comfortable in doing that. Take pleasure in what you do have control over, and be thankful for whatever happens. And it's like you're living the charmed life. You could live under a bridge, you could live in a penthouse, but you could still smile. That is possible, and that's the powerful thing, and that's an exciting thing. But it starts with gratitude.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. I usually wake up in the morning and then write down, three things that I'm grateful for, and then do the same thing at the end of
Yeah,
the day, just as a practice to remind myself that, even if I wake up and it's not the best day, I'm still woke up.
yeah, and we all have something to be thankful for, even if it's just the air you breathe, even if it's just like you got up and you were safe,
Yes,
whatever. Yeah, you don't have to have like, oh, I'm thankful for my Mercedes Benz, and I'm thankful for this
I know,
wonderful.
right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you
We
have those things,
s-
God bless you. It's like cool, and it's
all
like
the power to you,
yeah,
but
but too much is given, much is expected. I love that little reminder. And so I think some of us have more, some of us has less. That life is not fair that way, but I don't need to worry about the concept of fairness. My real world is what happens to me, the people I'm dealing with, my responsibilities. We can argue about fair and not fair. Hey, there's still work that needs to be done. Those dishes aren't going to wash themselves. That pile is not going to go away. Work has to be done. How am I going to get it done? And we can talk about how fair it was I had to do it, whatever, and argue about that for the rest of my life. But what good does it do you?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And you want to go over really quickly when your spaces are so everyone can know?
Sure, sure, yeah. Yeah, so out on X, so we have three spaces that the Via Stoica team does. We do it currently, and these times may change depending on when people listen to this podcast. But currently, we have a few, and we'll always have multiple. We might parse it down or move them around a little bit, but it's the way it's been for a while. Is on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific time. If you're on X, look up for us on X Spaces. It'll be the Via Stoica space. And then we have another one at 7, that goes for about 90 minutes, maybe a little bit more sometimes. Then 7 o'clock a.m. Pacific time on Thursday mornings, we have another one named similarly. We're talking about, kind of random life subjects in those two rooms specifically. We do some reading out of on Thursday mornings out of the Ryan Holiday book. I'm trying to remember. It's his daily devotional, the Daily Stoic. Sorry. And so there's some concepts for the day to think about, and we kind of read that and talk about it. That's kind of the process there. The Tuesday space is a little bit more flexible, and then on my Saturday space at 11 a.m. Pacific time, we go over kind of the core readings. There's so many. So little, I should say, so little Stoic books out there to review, like the ancient texts. The big three are Marcus Aurelius Seneca and Epictetus. We've gone through Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. We spent almost a year discussing that book one week at a time, going through the pages, reading it, and trying to pull the wisdom out of those pages and discuss the book. It's kind of a book review club, but it's also like, hey, this is about better living. So what do we get to take from that? How does it apply now? And it's shocking how much what he's talking about applies now. And we did
Absolutely.
Epictetus' discourses, and now we're working on Seneca's letters. So that's what we currently do. And these formats may change, but yeah, we're out there doing that stuff. And I'm part of the other communities. I've gone to Stoic Con. There is a Stoic, there is a Stoic convention every year. I
Oh,
go every,
really?
yeah, I go every year. I've been part of that for like the last 3 years. It's been virtual. Eventually, they're going to go back out and have it somewhere. They move around the world and
Oh,
do that.
that's so fun.
Yeah, I participate in that, and then I'm also part of the broader modern Stoicism movement. So I team up with the Orlando Stoics, the Los Angeles Stoics, and join their Zoom meetings and participate in their activities and things like that. And then I'm also on the radio. That's a side gig that I have with WPKN. Didn't bring that up before. WPKN 89.5 Bridgeport, 89.5 FM. I've been doing that on and off for the past almost 2 years. And then during that time, I've been able to interview some authors, including some Stoic people. It's not about Stoicism. That's just more general programming. It's a nice little radio station up there in the Northeast that's been around for like 60 years, 50, 60 years. A lot of good stuff out there. Radio and Uninvited is a program that I was part of, and I also do some spots on Second Saturday Magazine with Bob Johnson. So I've been able to inject some Stoicism in there to creep a little bit in, talk to some authors and some really inspiring people. So yeah, I'm connected, and hey, you can harness that and come talk to me or listen to my compatriots Benny and Brendan, and hopefully get some good tips and some good living advice.
The first time I talked to you, I think I said, "Oh my God, you have such a voice for radio," and you were like, "I am on the radio." I was like, "Oh my
Yeah,
God."
yeah, not bad for an IT guy, right? Who kind of just
Yeah, right.
fell into it. Yeah, people used to tell me, it's like, hey, you have a decent voice. Maybe you should do like some media stuff. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And this was like years ago. I'm like, I don't know about that. But again, an opportunity presented itself, and I reached out and said, hey, what the heck, let's do it. And yeah, it's been a great experience. I've talked to a lot of really interesting people, celebrities, and politicians, presidential candidates, all types of folks, and
Oh,
been able
that's
to do,
so cool.
yeah, I've been able to do some production too for that show, and so it's kind of like, hey, you learn a new thing and see where it goes. So it's been a positive experience, and I appreciate it. Thankful.
I will post all your media links and everything when I put the episode up. Another thing I wanted to point out is like when you do your group on Saturday, you take these like words that sometimes sound like they could be in Chinese, and then you um or you make them so easily broken down. And I think that's like such a wonderful skill because
Mm,
it's like
thank you.
um
Thank you.
it's so much easier for, the common people to kind of like just understand something that, wasn't written, however many years ago that was
Oh yeah,
written.
yeah. The last thing I'll say is about that is that's the whole point. Hey, I'm a common person too. I mean, I was not a philosophy major in college. I did go and graduate college. I was a tech major, but I think philosophy and human psychology and why do we do why do we do the things that we do? I think, Jody, you share that with me. All the books. I read a lot of books, and when I go back and look at my list, I'm like, a lot of it is like understanding the human mind or trying to break it down, or how does philosophy apply? What are other disciplines? I read the Tao Te Ching not too long ago. That's a Taoist. I believe that Eastern philosophy has some power too. Hey, I don't want you just to listen to me and try to become a Stoic. Seek your path, do what you have to do, find your peace, right? But know that there's things out there. There's different ways of getting there, but have something, have a framework in life, and go out there and pursue that. I feel I probably like 70-75% Stoic. I have a little Buddhist in me, I think, and some other common wisdom. We're all wisdom scavengers. I like that. I forget where I read that, but yeah, your path is unique to you, but stand for something, find something you resonate with, and then just do the work, and your life will change and increase tenfold.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're like a a fantastic example of that. You're a fantastic representative for, Stoicism and teaching people about a philosophy that they may not have, known anything about or even thought to even think about, like, or to try. So I appreciate you. I appreciate all the spaces on the podcast, and I always learn every time we have a conversation, I always learn something new, which is, I'm eager for knowledge all the time. So just know I appreciate you, and I'm grateful for your friendship. I'm grateful for your knowledge and your spaces and your time.
Thank you. Yeah, no, appreciate you too. And yeah, this stuff is accessible to all of us, and don't be afraid of some of the reading is a little bit crusty, and when you look, especially with the ancient writings, but if you break them down and take some time, hey, there's just a good core knowledge there, things that you can take today. And if you don't like that, just go to more contemporary authors. Look for people like Massimo Pigliucci, Donald J. Robertson, and of course Ryan Holiday. Seek them out on YouTube. Like Ryan has a really big YouTube offering out there, and you can see if you resonate with it. And there's a lot, like I said, a lot of good contemporary books, and you don't have to worry about some of this, these old writings that seem inaccessible. It's really all accessible to us.
Absolutely. And, thank you again for sharing. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate you, and I'm grateful that our paths have crossed.
Yeah, same, Jody. Yeah, great. I really appreciate your time, and this was really good, really fun. Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. We'll do it again sometime and
Sure,
pick a topic and just pick at it.
let's do it. Let's do it. Sounds
Okay,
good.
sounds good, my friend. Thank you again for your time, and we will talk soon.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Thank you for listening to the Mental Health Raw and Open podcast with your host, Jody Betty. If you enjoyed today's show, please give it a like and don't forget to smash that subscribe button. And if you appreciate the work I do, why not buy me a coffee? Details in the show notes. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Dorian Kent and produced by Jody Betty and Dorian Kent. This has been a raw and open production.